Hi, I'm Tamara Baker, Healthcare CTO of Zscaler,
And I'm Steven Hajny, Healthcare Technology Evangelist at Zscaler.
and we have trust issues. Do you have cybersecurity anxieties? If you do, you're in the right place.
Tamara's a former fighter pilot. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We've learned that the best defense starts with knowing exactly how your opponent thinks.
In the cockpit or on the mat, you don't get second chances, and the same is true in cybersecurity. That's why we follow one rule: think like a fighter pilot, defend like a black belt.
On each episode of this show, we and our guests from leading health systems across the country offer up practical strategies for inventing zero trust, assuming every user, device, and network connection could be a potential threat.
We'll also discuss the very latest in cyber trends, so consider this your cybersecurity training session.
Because we have trust issues, and we think you do too.
So strap in, stay sharp, and let's get started.
Hi, I'm Steven Hajny, and welcome to We Have Trust Issues. We have done a lot of cybersecurity related episodes, whether that is governance for AI, infrastructure modernization, made possible by rethinking how networking and security converge, or how the CISO role is ever changing. Today, however, we're going to talk about a topic that used to be near and dear to my heart as someone who dealt with this quite a bit when I was on the customer side. Now I just run as far away as possible when people bring it up. I kid. Today we actually have Heather Costa, who is the Director of Technology Resilience at Mayo Clinic, and we'll be talking all about technology resiliency and all the great things that come from that. Heather, I know you, and I'm sure a lot of people probably will know you who's going to listen to this, but I'd love for you to give us a brief introduction of who you are and then what your role consists of, because I have to imagine it's probably more complicated than our app is down, it's Heather's fault because we didn't have this book or something of the sort that we needed.
It's never my fault that we're down, just for the record.
But I love to hear.
So great to be with you today. I'm so thrilled to sit down and have a conversation with you. I'm Heather Costa, as you mentioned. I'm the Director of Technology Resilience at Mayo Clinic. So the role of my team is to ensure that we can effectively respond and recover in the event of any technology disruption. That includes disruption of any type. We are particularly focused on cyber disruption. I think we all feel and know that that's kind of the clear and present danger that threatens healthcare organizations across the country and the world, in fact. And it's the thing that is sort of new and different in the threat environment. There have long been weather and physical disruption that have been solved for quite some time ago. And the new kid on the block, if you will, is cyber. And we feel it more and more with each attack and each growing day and each growing year. So the other piece of that is that if we can effectively solve for cyber recovery, cyber incident, and compress the time that it takes to get to and through response and recovery, that can serve us for those physical disruptions as well. So that really is what the team is focused on. Prior to Mayo, I led the development of the Integrated Business Resilience Program at Cleveland Clinic. So I've been doing this for a little while. I've got background in cybersecurity, emergency management, business continuity, and what I would hope someday soon will be formally known as disaster recovery and more along the lines of technology resilience. So the title, the strategy around what we do is intentionally not called disaster recovery, primarily because when we think about sort of historically disaster recovery, it's been this all or nothing approach to the smoking hole in the ground. And what we know is that every day there are disruptions. Those disruptions are small, medium, and large. They come in all shapes and sizes. They have a number of different causes. Different things will disrupt us, and we need to be able to effectively respond and recover to keep things up to the extent that we can. And when we can't, how can we get it restored as quickly as possible? So that's our goal, is underlying the fabric of the organization in a resilient manner where people know what to do, when to do it, and they're equipped with what they need in order to execute both from a preparedness perspective, response, and recovery.
So when you think about that, I think about healthcare in particular has a ton of applications. And I think about the same thing with disasters. Like, well, what if our data center went down? It's like, yeah, but is that really the most like impactful thing that we can focus on? Is just if this terrible thing happens, or should we think about all these applications that we also have? So, I mean, from your standpoint, resiliency, I imagine that's across every single application that you guys have at Mayo.
So we like to think of it not in terms of the systems or applications, but rather in terms of the business and workflows, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if I can recover 500 applications, if those 500 applications aren't the right applications to get the critical workflows departments um, back up and operational, right? So what we have to be thinking about is how do we restore the delivery of care
Yeah.
wherever that is interrupted. So everything that we do has to be and should be, quite frankly, aligned to the business need. So that is the shift. That is one of the fundamental shifts that differentiates technology resilience from disaster recovery. Is that again, it largely was an all or nothing approach, thinking in terms of applications and what's the most critical applications, and tell me about the application that you need to run your department. So you bring it up a level. Everyone will tell you that their application is the most important one. And I know you've seen it. I've seen it. We've all experienced it where we have our organizations with, you know, 300, 400, 500 mission critical or tier one applications. And when you think about that in terms of cyber disruption and recovery, there's no way you'll recover it. There's no way to know where to start. Where do I start? And how do I know that the things that I'm recovering are going to give us sort of that minimum viable hospital that's going to allow care for patients to continue in a safe, you know, sort of preserving that safe environment of care,
Yeah.
and is meaningful. Like, am I bringing the emergency department back online, or do I have one application for nursing and one application for dermatology and one application, and none of them collectively help move the organization forward on that journey? And so really it's that alignment is crucial in this work, and that differentiates the historical way that we've looked at disaster recovery and how we're moving into and through technology resilience.
And does timing play a part in that too? So if I think about again, like what you were saying about workflows, hey, you may have 500 tier one applications, but at the end of the day, it's going to take me 20 hours and you're not going to achieve what you were talking about with like getting that workflow back to where it needs to be by spending 20 hours on that, where if you spent an hour on insert other things here that actually help that workflow to get back to kind of that minimal viable product. Is that also what you kind of take into account from that resiliency standpoint?
So timing is important. The trick to timing is that um, when we're talking about cyber disruption, a lot of the answers are it depends.
Yeah, yeah,
So I can test it in isolation, and I can say, okay, it takes us this much time to recover this system. I can put hands to keyboard and even have, an end user test to confirm recoverability of that system, and it took us this much time in order to do it. Then enters, someone actively working against you in your environment, right? And so there's that containment and eradication that has to happen and respond before you can get to recovery and then move through recovery. So all of those things play a factor. And so largely there's a lot of ambiguity in the work. There's a lot of ambiguity in, those conversations around how long is it going to take? It depends. The number of times I say that in any given day, week, month, um, I don't know that I can count them, but that's just the reality of the work. I wish we could recover 520 hours. In a cyber scenario, we would be doing good to recover one in
yeah,
20 hours in some cases, if you have to think about it in terms of bare metal rebuild, right? So it's not a recovery from backup. If you have to ensure that if you have backups, are the backups clean? Like, so there's other steps around data resilience and data integrity that are critical in in that story that change what that recovery looks like, which is why we focus so much on the cyber aspects. Because again, from a physical perspective, restore for backup is second nature, and it's something that organizations have been doing for a decade or more.
Yeah. No, and I love that you talk about the it depends, right? I think that's such a big thing. And actually, one of the things that I love about you the most from the time that we met a couple of years back was that you're so transparent and candid about things. And I think that also makes so much sense when you talk about resiliency because it's not just as simple as saying, yeah, give me like an hour. I'll just hit the button real quick. We'll be good. Like, and that's what people used to tell me all the time when I was on the customer side was like, no, you bought a product that says that it has like an RPO of 20 minutes and then like an RTO, but and like all of these things that I'm like, guys, but that's not always realistic because it depends, right? Is the network down? Do I have internet? Do I not have internet? Like, and I always have loved that you've always been so transparent just in life when I've talked to you, but also I feel like you are extremely transparent when you talk about resiliency too, because it is such a big deal to be as transparent as possible, to not set expectations, especially in the healthcare world. Um,
Yeah, and it's not the easiest seat to always be in, but I don't know any other way to do it. And I would much rather, um, I'm a firm believer that we have to sort of prepare for the worst and hope for the best. If you do that, you can pivot on the fly. Like if you have this worst case scenario, I plan for that, I know what we're going to do, and then what you get is better than what you thought, you can pivot that on the fly and you go, okay, I don't need this part of the plan, right? If you've done your planning well enough where it's not turn by turn directions, but rather it's a map, I can identify where I am and chart the path of where I need to go. If you think about it in terms of a storm or something, right? So if there's been some big storm and we've got trees down here and there, I'm going to find where I am on the map, and I need to know where the tree is across the road. So I can't get through the pathway that I've normally gone. I have to figure out, well, I'm going to take this side street and go around the back alleys to get to where I need to be. So the planning has to be done from that lens, right? It's enough to point you in the right direction, which helps with planning paralysis and those sorts of things that people get, right? If you're trying to think about every eventuality and every tree that might be down and then plan specifically. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but many years ago, my grandmother used to go to AAA and get a triptych before we had phones in our pockets that had GPS and all of those things, right? And so the triptych, they would put together these slivers of the map and they draw this yellow line with the highlighter and show you the path to go. And so if we feel like we're approaching planning in that particular way, well, what happens when that line is disrupted? Which way do I go? I don't have enough of the map to be able to make that determination. Then I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to be stuck. So that's really that balance of planning in a way that's helpful and that moves the needle forward, something that has to be understood by someone at least two removed from the author, right? So much is what we keep in our heads, and documenting it. I say if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist. But doing that in a way, again, that brings that up a level. So you're just pointed in the right direction. And then you make those decisions, boots on the ground, based on the situation and having that situational awareness with for you and the team around you to be able to navigate what that looks like. And you can't do that if you're sugarcoating things, right? If you're not transparent about what likely would be the reality, if you're not transparent about what the worst case scenario looks like, you can't plan backwards. So if you land in worst case scenario and you've planned with all of these assumptions that are behind rose colored glasses, you're not going to be able to pivot. You're not going to have what you need in order to make that change. You're going to be stuck on your triptych with your little yellow line going, I don't know which way to go. I don't have enough of the map to make that determination. And so really that's what we're trying to avoid. And what I've learned is that this work is relational, and the only thing I have is my integrity. And for me, it's an integrity conversation.
No, I love it. And some could say that you could have trust issues with the plan that somebody or the triptych that somebody may be having. If you're just tuning in, this is We Have Trust Issues. I'm Steven Hajny. Here with my guest, Heather Costa of Mayo Clinic. So far, we've been talking about technology resilience, and we're getting ready to talk about cybersecurity and how those two intersect. So, Heather, shifting gears on you, this whole concept of zero trust, never trust, always verify. However, in resilience planning, you have to assume that stuff will go wrong. Um, how does this change though when you think about resiliency? So I think about how identity really, from a zero trust standpoint, is the key to everything. It is like the key to the kingdom, so to speak, is if I know that you are identified, I know who you are, I know what applications you should have, etc. But I have to imagine that that also creates a challenge when we think about resiliency, because I have to worry about those identities. Are those identities even able to be accessed to be able to get to insert workflow here? How has that changed your approach, or has that just broadened the scope even of resiliency planning for you?
So I think it's just part and parcel of the story, right? So anytime we think about, that becomes sort of that story of the dependent infrastructure. If anyone is doing this work and they're not thinking about identity as ground zero, if you will, you're doing it wrong. I don't know how else to say it. Right? We have to think about that. If our identity infrastructure is impacted, and this is not a Mayo thing. This is not a Heather thing. This is just the reality of the work. And the bad guys know it too, right? So that's a target, that there's a big target on identity, disruption of identity systems, because they know as well as I do, as well as you do, that that's the thing, sort of the ring that rules them all. So we have to, from a cybersecurity perspective, we have to have the right protections in place. From a resilience perspective, we have to know what it looks like if the identity is interrupted, disrupted through any means. It could be a server issue that's not cyber. It could be a cyber issue, whatever that is. There has to be a plan and a pathway in order to recover that as quickly as possible. Nothing else is going to work until I get identity back up and operational. And I think that's true regardless of disruption type.
And I think it's a big part of it, as you said, it could be various factors. It could just be an outage. It could just be, somebody unplugged the cable, as a server. I've seen it happen. It could be all kinds of cool things that could happen that might cause that. But I do agree that it has to be one of the first things that we think about getting up and running. I always like to try to keep this as real and practical as possible. When I talk to guests and when I'm out in the field talking to customers or prospects or whoever lets me talk. What is some of the things that you guys do over in your area that you think others could take from to make their lives better and easier within a healthcare organization? So I think about people who love tabletop exercise. I think about people who are like, no, we keep all of our documentation in a secured locked folder that goes in a lockbox somewhere, right? Like, what are some of the things that you have found over the years working both at Cleveland Clinic and Mayo that you would take with you somewhere else or teach to other folks on getting to this position?
That's a great question. I think a couple of things are true. One, you have to start. There is no perfection in this work. It is literally a journey. It is a path of continuous improvement, and it always will be. So people have heard me say, and sometimes I feel like a broken record, but it's just true, right? That this is a program, not a project. So you'll never put a pin in, and you'll never put a pin in it and call it done. So I think that's the first thing. Some of that comes from not trying to start from the idea of perfection, which we have a culture in healthcare in general that is risk averse, and rightly so, right? The stakes are high. They couldn't be higher. So we are risk averse, and we want things to be perfect before we start and before we kind of move through the journey. This work is a little daunting because it almost feels like a ticking time bomb. You don't know how much time is on the clock, and you don't know how long the fuse is. And so you're sort of working against this invisible thing. And so everyone feels like you have to hurry up and you have to do all the things. And if you don't have it figured out and if it's not perfect and you haven't thought about everything, then you're going to have a problem. Even if you think about everything, when this day comes, it's going to be not what you expected. It'll be worse than anything you've experienced, and you're going to have to pivot on the fly in some cases. That's just the reality of it. So you start where you are and you understand that you have to make steps along the way. I tell my team all the time, the goal is not perfection. The goal is to be better tomorrow than we are today. And I think when you take that approach, it becomes you're getting the nickels. I'm not looking for the Hail Mary down the field, right? I'm moving the ball five yards at a time. If you're a money person, nickels will get me quarters and quarters will get me dollars. Um, whichever way you want to think about it. But I think that is part of it, which requires patience with yourself, with your teams, with your organization as you're on the journey. But you have to start. You can't wait for it to be perfect to have something written down. Start documenting it and then make it better. Make it better tomorrow. Make it better the next day. And it has to be that ongoing process. We have to keep revisiting the changes, the way that the threat environment is shifting, the way that the organization is changing and shifting, how the network environment is changing and shifting. We have to be aware of those things and we have to adjust to those things. If we don't have the answer today, that doesn't mean we'll never have the answer. If we're on the path of continuous improvement, we'll get there. We're going to solve for that thing that we couldn't solve for, that gap that we had no answer for in the meantime. And the other thing I think is important is solving for the problem, not the solution. And by that I mean so much of this becomes, well, I need laptop in a closet, or I need, like, I get these kind of things all the time. And I'm like, well, here's the reasons why that's not a great idea. And here's the problem that it will cause. It's different. Again, that cyber conversation is very different than physical disruption, because in a physical disruption, it's static. The thing happens, you're recovering from the thing. You don't have an adversary actively working against you that is changing what the thing is, that's moving the end zone, if you will, or moving the finish line. And so, and actively working against you to thwart your efforts. And that changes what is a feasible workaround or option in a cyber incident, cyber response and recovery scenario versus a physical disruption or response scenario. But so often we center in on the thing that we're sure we have to have without connecting the dots for why it matters. What is the problem statement? What is the thing we're actually solving for? So rolling back to what's the workflow every day? Where is that workflow broken in this situation? Then you start to understand, okay, this is the thing that what you actually need is the root cause, this root cause analysis. The thing that's actually the root cause, it might not be this idea that I've had of what's going to solve it. It might be something totally different, but I'm not going to see it and I'm not going to innovate and think about what those other options may be if I'm solving for what someone has stated as a solution versus understanding what I'm trying to actually achieve.
Which is so big. And I think about a couple of those things that I've dealt with over the years. And I think when I think about things like solving for the actual problem, right, and not just the solution, it's such a big part that I feel people get so hung up on, and even just like the not knowing where to start. I have folks that have these lofty ideas of, well, we just go from zero to zero trust, and it works, right? Like you guys just like press the button, you just next, done, click, finish. And I'm like, no, it's not how it works. Like, yeah, but it sounds so complicated. I'm like, yeah, but it's not complicated if you take the first step to try, right? And even in my own life, like, hey, going to the gym is really hard. Sometimes, like, life gets in the way. But if I just don't go to the gym ever because life got hard for a week, then what does that do to my own personal sanity and health and everything else? I think about that with cyber and IT in general, and health IT is like that paralysis analysis thing is like, guys, we just have to take a step. Like, let's just take a step. And if we mess up, it's a step. We'll just back up, right? Like, we'll just take a step
Mhm.
back and call it a day. So I agree with that so much that there is just, it's something that we can do as a industry in healthcare. It's just like, let's just take a step. I understand it's a risk adverse step, but like, let's take that first pinky toe out, right, to that step to even get there. So, Heather, we have a fun thing that we do in any episode of We Have Trust Issues. We always like to ask our guests if they have any stories of when they had trust issues, whether in their personal life or professional. I've talked about bringing my daughter to her first day of public school and my wife staring through the windows to make sure that she got to her classroom. We've had Nate Kuchar from University of Vermont Medical Center talk about bladesmithing and burning his hand. And we've had folks like Martha over at Trinity Healthcare, an architect, who talked about people not trusting that she knew practitioner level knowledge. So, do you have a story of your choosing, or it could be a couple of stories that you would like to share with us?
So I think I am maybe I'm a natural skeptic. I don't know. Trust doesn't always come easy. I mean, there's little things that I do in my daily life. When I'm out to eat at a restaurant, I don't sit with my back to the room. So when I arrive with my family, my children, they all kind of pause and wait for me to choose the seat that I'm most comfortable in so that I can purvey the room. There's what I always know is where the exits are and where the bathroom is. I think those are the two most important things that you need to know when you sit down at a restaurant. Similarly, when I fly, I get on the plane and I'm paying attention to where the closest exit is. I'm not a fearful flyer, but that's the thing that gives me comfort. I sit down, I'm like, okay, 2 rows in front of me is the exit, or 1 row behind me is closer. I know where I need to go. It's probably why I love doing this work. It's probably why I think I'm fairly good at what I do. And part of it may be that, right? Just that understanding, surveying what's happening, and having enough information to be able to move in the right direction if the situation requires that. So I think
I
that's
love it.
probably
Yeah. I mean, natural skeptic, I feel like fits right in with the job. Thank you for the time today. I really do appreciate it. We haven't connected enough recently, so I love being able to catch up with you, even kind of pre-show. Listeners, listen, if you want to connect with Heather, you can find her LinkedIn profile on the episode show page at healthcarenowradio.com. You can learn more about our show on the program page on healthcarenowradio.com or at zscaler.com/healthcare. Please connect with Tamara and I on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your feedback and let us know what trust issue is top of mind for you. Until next time, think like a fighter pilot and defend like a black belt.